Good evening and welcome to the 2021-2022 Student Member of the Board of Education debate. My name is Beckett Hummer and I'm the CRASC Secretary of Education. I will be moderating today's debate. Here's how the debate will work. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak and introduce themselves. The speakers will be in alphabetical order by last name. The order of speakers was determined by the candidates at a pre-debate meeting. Questions for the debate have been submitted by CRASC as well as online via the CRASC website. Thank you for all the students who have submitted questions. Many will be featured this evening. The candidates have not had the opportunity to review the questions prior to the debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question with a 30-second rebuttal. No more than 2 rebuttals per person per question. If candidates have a rebuttal, they may use the raised hand feature once all have responded. Please be advised that this debate is being broadcasted live to the ACPS TV YouTube channel. Once all questions have been addressed, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give brief closing remarks. Now we will start with introductions. So, starting with Boomy from Arundel High School.
Opening remarks, right? Thank you. Good evening and welcome, and thank you for joining us for this debate. My name is Bumi Masore, and I'm a junior at Arundel High School. Many of you watching may know me as a student, a classmate, a friend, and hopefully soon, your future student member of the Board of Education. This year has been unprecedented. That goes without saying. Virtual learning is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the changes we've seen in our lives this past school year. As chairwoman for the Anne Arundel County Youth Advisory Council, I've seen the havoc wreaked upon our community alongside students from every corner. Loved ones have been lost, academic motivation has dwindled, and mental health amongst students has become more fragile than ever. I, alongside my fellow candidates, are faced with a difficult task. How do we build back better? My philosophy throughout this school year and as a potential SMOB candidate has been how we can build back better together. And the students and community members overall are part of that solution. I, for one, really want us to go back to the classroom, but understand that everything is not that simple. And if elected, I strive to put students' mental health as the top priority. We're not all going to be at the same place academically or emotionally, and that's okay. I will ensure that student faculty meet students where they're at, and I will provide training so that students, teachers, and faculty all know what behavioral changes are being caused by being in this really quarantine-like state for so long. I seek to edit late penalties on assignments to give students time to readjust to this culture shock of in-person school. But most importantly, I want to address the issues that have plagued our school system long before COVID was in the picture. As founder of my school's Equity Leadership Council, I've been blessed with opportunities to talk to students and faculty across AACPS and throughout the DMV about how to become an ally, anti-racist, and more tolerant. I want to bring this work to the Board of Education to make our school system seek diversity instead of just accepting it. I want to bring more representation of female and POC writers to our English classes, reform health and curriculum in our history departments to include LGBTQ students, and provide opportunities for ESOL students to become more immersed in their school communities. I hold equity very close to my heart, and I put it in everything I do. That's why I want to have high school activity buses so that no student will miss out on something either academic or extracurricular because they don't have a ride home. Over the course of the evening, you're going to hear about my plans, my passions, and my values. And if you're interested in learning more about my campaign, you can follow me on Instagram at BoomyForSMOB. I have the utmost respect for everyone here, and I really, really hope that you enjoy all of our presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to Fletcher from Severna Park High School.
I joined our school community when I was 6, and since then, I've been the fortunate beneficiary of all the benefits our schools and communities have to offer. I've had so many opportunities which have allowed me to build a sense of self-worth, as though I mattered to my community, my peers, and the school staff. Having this feeling allowed me to feel support in everything I did, whether it be student government, achieving in class, or out of school, like attaining Eagle Scout, working for our environment, or helping our local military community. Having that sense of purpose provided me with the motivation and the reasons behind wanting to do more. That sense of self-worth is important, but it is not guaranteed to us. When students have opportunities in their life to grow and feel relevant, they seek the harder class, more clubs, and ultimately grow to be a successful part of their community. They can overcome any challenge that they're faced with. But when our students are suffering, when they don't feel important, and when students don't believe in themselves, it hurts way more than just them. Our AACPS family lost yet another student this year. She meant so much to so many. And while it is not the fault of the school system, and while I can't stop these tragedies from happening again, I see an opportunity to make our students or make our schools into a place where every student can feel protected and cared about, where students can be safe. We can make every student feel that sense of worth and importance. Mental health isn't something we can just check off of a checklist. It is something we need to rediscover and work on every day, the same we do our physical health. We can raise up our student body by returning to in school in an improved, safe, and sane program. We must relook at topics like mental health in the context of our return to school and make mental health a part of its foundation. We must relook at topics like our curriculum and open the door to opportunities provided by the rich academic programs offered across the county. And we must open up education on topics that might make us a little uncomfortable, like the history of those who have been ignored by traditional history lessons. We cannot be afraid to have conversations that lead to understanding and good personal growth, whether it be about the history of the disenfranchised or the emotional toll a year of isolation has taken. I'll close my opening statements with this. Together, we will all go back to school. Together, we will all learn about and embrace our mental health. And together, we will all open our eyes to worlds that we weren't exposed to before. We will do it together. And I believe that we have 2 years in the mouth for a reason. It's like there was an intent for us to listen more. If elected, you have my commitment that I will listen to the voice and the entire student body of this county. I will set aside my personal interests, my history, and I will learn from yours no matter who you are or where you come from. You matter to me. Your voice matters to me, and I will work tirelessly and without fail to bring your voice forward and represent it along with the many other voices here in Anne Arundel County. It is your voice that will make this school system better, and I will listen to it and make sure that it is the one we hear. This I swear. My name is Fletcher Port, and I want to be your next student member of the board.
Thank you. And lastly, Natalie from Broadneck High School.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Smith, and I'm a current junior at Broadneck High School in the PVA program. And I've had some pretty diverse experiences in our public school system. I live in Glen Burnie and have been a charter student at Monarch Academy. I also attended Glen Burnie Park Elementary, have been a PVA magnet student at Brooklyn Park Middle, and for the last 3 years, a proud Bruin. This background has given me firsthand experience with the diverse needs, discrepancies across the county, and has instilled a deep understanding of the need for equity. My experience, however, does not stop at being an AACPS student. I also have direct experience diversifying our curriculum and writing legislation. This year, I've worked diligently with my peers and faculty to add female, BIPOC, and LGBTQ composers to the Performing Visual Arts vocal program, both in class and with solo repertoire, and hope to implement similar programs outside of PVA vocal and outside of our One Magnet program as a whole. I also have experience crafting legislation, specifically regarding environmental issues. Both of these are skills vital for being a member of the Board of Education. I'm running for SMOB to promote representation, collaboration, and participation around the county. This means equitable representation for all students and staff, direct collaboration between SMOB and the board, our student union CRASC, the entire student body, and the many other resources we have in our county. Additionally, working to increase participation in student advocacy on all levels of education. I am here to represent you, to work alongside you, to listen to you. I'm here to advocate for all students. That is my agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will move on and begin with the questions. First question is, what originally motivated you to run for SMOB? We'll start with Boomy.
Well, I mean, I think this is a really, really good question just because I honestly did not know what the position was until Drake. I saw a lot of different people posting about him and what the SMOB position was. And I remember thinking, that's really interesting. And over the course of the last year, I've gotten more involved in social justice within my own community and in other communities as well. And because of that, I thought to myself, if I can bring what I've been doing in my Equity Leadership Council, if I can bring what I've been doing in Let's Talk Justice, if I can bring all my passions to make our school better, to make people who are of the LGBTQ community feel more included, people who are of the BIPOC community feel more included, if I can take all of that passion and put it into the board position, then I'll have done something with my junior year, with my senior year, and in my time in Anne Arundel County. So that just inspired me to apply, and well, here we are.
Fletcher?
So in everything that I've done, I've always tried to make sure it's centered around making better for the world that I'm in and leaving it better than I found it. Whether it be my Eagle Scout project, where I made 500 care packages that we gave to deploying troops, or what I do with my student government involvement, it's always about how can I make the world and the environment that I live in better for other people. And I think that the student member of the board is a great way to do that. I'm able to spend the time listening to students, working with students to figure out what the priorities are and what the concerns are, and then bring that to the board. It's what I find about this position that is so excellent. And after sitting, quite literally behind the screen this past year and watching students' passion and students feeling as though they aren't really having solutions to their problems, I want to take it upon myself to then address those students' problems and be a lifeline for those students, be someone who the students can trust to represent them and listen to them, and then make decisions that support them in every way, in every meaning of the word support.
Natalie?
Similar to Boomy, I also did not know that this position existed until I heard about Drake. And, I feel that's a real problem in our county, people not knowing about who is representing them, how they can get their needs to their representatives, and how they can advocate. Additionally, with my experience around the county, that was originally the thing that motivated me to start the process of running, because, I've witnessed the discrepancies, the differences, and how you can't treat the county as one size fits all.
Any rebuttals? Great. Next question is, what are your plans for student outreach to gain input for board agenda items? And we'll start with Fletcher.
So first and foremost, we got to have students in the know of what's going on if we actually want to allow them to help out and feel as though their voice matters. So that's going to require a lot more advertising within school systems about ways to communicate. I know that I spent the first half of this year feeling a little frustrated. I remember the end of last year when we were on a day-to-day basis about what our school schedule was going to look like, feeling frustrated, feeling like I didn't have anyone there who I knew I could go to help out. Advertising the student member of the board role is so important because the student member of the board is someone who goes through that position on a daily basis. So other students can come to them and know that they're able to have, a little bit of empathy in everything they want to talk about and discuss. So one of my priorities is going to be making sure that we advertise what the student member of the board position is to every student within our county. And that looks like talking to student governments. Student governments are really one of the greatest ways that we can connect to high schools to begin with, and middle schools as well. So make sure that we connect with them and they know that, hey, if you have a concern, speak to me. I'm here for you. That's the best way to really communicate in my mind to start with.
Great. Natalie?
My main goal, if I were to be elected, is to create a direct line of communication between me and the student body. I want their input on everything, because ultimately it's their voice that I would be uplifting. I also want to build a trajectory starting from the elementary level and moving on up to help get that representation and promote participation within student advocacy, starting with promoting things like communication skills on the elementary level, then working with advisors and staff on the middle school level to try to get those SGAs really off the ground and get middle school participation in CRASC, in student advocacy, and then from the high school level, making sure everybody knows what is out there for them, what they can do to get their voices heard.
Boomy? You're muted.
Sorry. I really love with what both of the candidates have said, but I think that something that's really important to realize is that not everyone is involved in SGA and not everyone wants to be involved in SGA. And we are not just representing these students who are part of their school's student governments. We are representing all the students K through 12 that are in Anne Arundel County schools. So how do we connect to the kids who'd rather be at band practice rather than an SGA meeting? How do we connect to the kids who don't do any clubs? Well, I want to emphasize use of social media, what kids are on all the time these days. I want to make sure that I give access to all students. You don't need to be in a certain Google Classroom, a certain advisor's classroom to connect with me. You can go to a town hall, a Q&A, something where every single person, regardless of what club you happen to be in school, can talk to me, because that's what's important. Getting every single student, regardless of what club you're in, to have access to me, the student member of the board, should I be elected.
We'll start with Fletcher.
So the first piece I want to touch on there is, first and foremost, student governments. And as you know, when you look at the student member of the board elections bylaws, they inscribe that the delegates of that student government are voting on behalf of a specific area. So those delegates are voting, maybe for example, on behalf of band or on behalf of athletics. The other thing that I want to, focus on is student governments are the representatives of their school. So I'm not saying, hey, as an individual, what can help you? I'm saying, hey, as a student government, what can help your school? Because they're supposed to have the best knowledge on that. And the question that asks you—
And time's up, sorry.
I was afraid of that, no problem.
No problem. You have another rebuttal if you'd like later. Natalie?
I'm actually really happy you brought that up, Boomy, because I do believe that someone sitting in a representative position, it's your job to seek out your constituents, the people that you represent, not the other way around. So going directly to the student body, I wasn't just talking about SGAs, seeking out students, creating meets, creating forums, creating classrooms that you can hear from everybody, just making yourself as accessible as possible.
Fletcher?
So my question to you, Boomy, would be, in cases where middle schoolers, because we see this commonly, middle schoolers aren't as involved with their social medias at that point, at that age. What do you do to make sure that you're getting the right middle school outreach? I know my plan would be to work with student governments on a regular basis and get as wide a perspective as possible. How do you address that problem of when students don't have a social media connection?
And Boomy?
I'm not really sure what right middle school outreach means, but I'm assuming that you mean, how do you reach the kids that will give you the response and are really well knowledge? I would say that in terms of middle school, I know that not a lot are allowed to have social media, but again, for those who are part of SGA, we connect to them in some way, right? I know that many different schools, they have assemblies, they have ways to get kids who aren't able to go to SGA after school or even during school in the morning to actually get their voices out there. Kids do activism in middle school all the time. Using the—
Okay. Any other rebuttals? Okay. The next question is, the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils, or CRASC, is the representative organization of all students enrolled in secondary schools of AACPS. How will you ensure fluid communication and a collaborative relationship with the members of CRASC? And I can repeat the question later if you need be, but we're starting with Natalie.
So I believe the relationship between CRASC and the student member of the board is ultimately teamwork. You should be collaborating together, and to ensure that's happening, attending CRASC meetings, getting to know people on CRASC, and just really getting yourself in there and making it obvious that you're there for teamwork and not to, dictate, that kind of thing.
Boomy?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. CRASC is the representative organization of all students enrolled in the secondary schools of AACPS. How will you ensure fluid communication and a collaborative relationship with the members of CRASC?
Right. So, like, I think all the candidates on here will agree that having a good connection with CRASC is of the utmost importance as being a student member of the Board of Education. And like Natalie has already highlighted, attending CRASC meetings, attending CRASC adjacent events, community organization events run by CRASC, even service learning events that are involving people who do CRASC is important to fostering that relationship. But I think that's something that's also important when having that type of line of communication, is that there's a difference between what CRASC can be involved in as, being a student member of the board, and what a certain representative would need to decide as someone who has a better understanding of board politics than those in CRASC. So balancing that relationship and taking the feedback and making sure that it's feedback and not just decree is most important for having a solid relationship between the two powers.
And Fletcher.
So I think the important thing to remember is, what is CRASC's intention? And well, in a lot of ways that I'm sure, my fellow candidates would agree, CRASC is supposed to be, in a way, the student government of the county. So they're supposed to be the lead representative of all the different parts of the county. And all those meetings that we have are really to talk about how our county is doing, what priorities we need to refocus ourselves on, and plan events, for the county. And so with that, we have to make sure that when we have those CRASC meetings, as a student member of the board, you're listening in those CRASC meetings, because a lot of times what they're talking about is things that affect every student of the county. And so if we listen in those meetings and we take the time to really pay attention to what they're saying, we can find where the focuses are and where the concerns are. We have a part of every meeting just about where we talk about present student concerns and present things to talk about. If we listen to those things, it gives us exact talking points for things we need to focus on come time for board meetings and other events.
Any rebuttals? Okay. Do you believe that CRASC should work to expand SMOB voting? And if so, why and in what way? And we're going to start with Boomy.
I will say I was a little surprised when I learned about the intricacies of the SMOB voting within this election and delegates. And so I will just say very clearly, yes, I do think that we should expand the way in which we vote in our elections, whether that be SMOB elections, CRASC elections, because as we are supposed to be representing the 86,000 students in AACPS, and we're only being able to connect to the SGAs. And at this point, many of them are inactive because of COVID or other different difficulties, then we aren't really representing all of AACPS. Now, in terms of how we go about that, I would suggest that we, one, expand the delegations, and two, go to different sections of the school system. Many schools have the same different types of clubs, and borrow from those areas instead of just borrowing from kids who are already in SGA and already have certain types of ideas that may not reflect the rest of their school system.
Okay, next is Fletcher.
So I will come right out and say that I think that every student of the secondary level should have a vote. At the elementary school level, it is hard to talk about some of the things we talk about and, really get our points across to them and have them have a thorough understanding of what exactly they're voting on. But at the secondary level of middle schools and high schools alike, they have the knowledge and the maturity level to vote. And so how we can say every student's voice matters and that we have to listen to every student's voice and then not actually let their voice matter is hypocritical, and it is just, quite frankly, and to be blunt, saddening to me. We need to make sure that next year, when we're in person again, we are allowing every student to have their voice recognized. Admittingly, this year, we can't really distribute information in the same way we can in person. But if in person, we're spending community wellness, learning about the candidates for some time, and then voting, I see no reason why we can't let every student's voice matter and let every vote count.
And Natalie.
I 100% agree with what both of my candidates have said. I also agree that every student should have a vote when it comes to SMOB. You should know who's representing you. You should have a say in who is representing you. The way to go about that, like Boomy touched on, this was a very intricate process of voting with delegates and stuff like that. And I think we need to start with making organizations like CRASC and student advocacy more accessible. You need to get people in the know before you can start the process of giving out the votes. People need to have these organizations accessible to them.
Any rebuttals? Okay. What makes you different from previous SMOBs, and what new ideas would you bring to the table? So we're starting with Fletcher.
So I'm a big guy on communication, and I think that that's something you're going to hear all of us say. But the truth behind that is I love working with people. I'm really a comical kind of guy, and working with people is something that I've been doing for a long time, talking a lot longer if you ask some of my teachers. And so my objective and what I would do is, go to schools, spend a lot of times going to schools and working with schools, really step into other students' shoes, as opposed to just sort of, have meetings here and there and think that I can kind of pick up on what the students are putting down. I want to spend the time walking in those students' shoes and really exploring what they're going through to make sure that I can then make the best choices for them and really hear out what they're talking about. There's a difference between really listening to someone and understanding what somebody is going through. Spending the time is crucial, especially in the student member of the board role.
Natalie?
I think one thing that I bring different to the table is my diverse experience in my previous education. I've gone to school in the Northern Cluster, the Southern Cluster. I've also been a magnet and charter student respectively. I've seen the discrepancies, I've seen the diversity, and I've seen the different needs. And I think I can bring that perspective to the table, which is something that, is a little bit new.
And Boomy?
I agree with both of what my candidates have said. And while I think that it's really, really important that we have solid communication with all of our students, I think it's even more important to emphasize who are we communicating with. It's one thing to talk to the same delegation of students all the time about the same issues, but I think that what makes me different from perhaps my fellow competitors is that I have made it a priority, not just throughout this year, not just throughout maybe my sophomore year, but throughout my entire secondary experience, to talk to as many different students as possible. I've talked to students from not only geographically different areas of the county, but from different backgrounds, first generation American, English as a second language, from the LGBTQ community, fellow minorities in our school system, to see that same experience, what is going on. And not only have I talked to different people with different experiences, but I've already in my own school internalized those experiences to see how can I make it better starting at Arundel, and I want to bring that to the board.
Fletcher?
I think a big key piece here is having a good understanding of what the role means. And commonly, there isn't a lot of good experience you could have that will get you ready for this role. But the piece I would want to point out is I've actually spent a lot of this year working with Drake on some different things around student workload, student mental health. I'm friends with the 3 previous SMOBs, and that's really helpful. It's helped me to really think like a student member of the board and get some good ideas around those things. And it's something that I want to look to continue is, taking what I've already learned and then seeing how I can apply that more frequently in everything I do.
Thanks. Boomy?
I think that it's great that our SMOB right now, Drake, has worked with a lot of different students in AACPS. I myself have worked with Drake on Let's Talk Justice, but I've also worked with other student leaders. I've worked with kids who don't always get to have their names in the paper, who don't get to be on WBAL, but are doing just as great work. And I think that's what's most important about our time here and what type of position I'm trying to do. Not just working with the big guys, but working with the people who are doing the stuff in their community that needs to be done.
Natalie?
I 100% agree with Boomy. I don't have the biggest background in CRASC, but I do have background advocating and lifting up student voices, within classrooms, on a school basis, on a program basis, talking to people, not as a big leader, but as a fellow student, as someone who wants to get their voice heard.
Fletcher?
So what I heard was, what makes you individualistic and what is special about you that other student member of the board candidates and previous SMOBs don't have? And, I touched on my communication piece. And when I mentioned that I've already worked with Drake, it isn't to say that my main focus has been working with Drake. It's to say that I've already started to work and think about, in the ways that we need to, how to get things done. That's what I've been working to do already.
Any other rebuttals? Okay. Other board members have a lengthier term than the SMOB does. What are your 3 main initiatives that you will advocate for if elected as AACPS SMOB with a limited term? We'll starting with Natalie.
I touched on this a little bit in my introduction. The three things I want to focus on are representation, participation, and collaboration. I believe in equitable and representation on a school-by-school basis. What individual schools have individual needs. On the collaboration basis, I believe that, the SMOB role is about teamwork. It's about working collaboratively with CRASC, working collaboratively with students, working collaboratively with the other members and Dr. Arlotto. Additionally, participation, really getting that participation up in our county, inspiring and, getting students wanting to, participate in CRASC, participate in student advocacy, participate in school in general, just making it a fun and safe experience.
Boomy?
I think that it's really, really sad that because we're all exemplary students, we only have a certain amount of time on the board. And so personally, what I would like to do is reinforce my main objective, fixing the things that have been a problem since before COVID and certainly haven't gone away. And so one thing I would like to do up front, if possible, I would like to get high school activity buses, as I have throughout my entire academic career been struggling with having a ride home and have sometimes had to walk home just because I don't have someone to pick me up. And that really inhibits people from being successful like they should be. Second, I want to encourage more POC riders, more people of color to be seen in our schools because they deserve to have a voice just like everyone else. And third, I want to reform and make sure that mental health is at the forefront, not just mental health, but also neurodiversity, because that is just as important to me as neurotypical students and their experience, and making sure that education and awareness is put into our school systems so that students can carry it out throughout their academic career and in their adult life.
And Fletcher.
So first thing and foremost is students' mental health. If students are doing very well mentally, then that's how we can gauge whether or not we're doing the right things. A healthy student and one that's doing well is one that has opportunities and feel as though they're important in their school system. And so first and foremost, we need to get students' mental health up. Now, how do we do that? That's that second piece, getting opportunities out there to students. Allowing them to feel like their own special interests are important is what is most important in order to allow them to have good mental health and feel like they're a successful part of their communities. Third and another thing is making sure that our school's environment is a good one. That comes through, having those tough discussions and also the student workload piece. We have an obligation to make sure that our students are learning a lot this next year to make up for the learning that we haven't done yet this year. And we have to make sure that we accomplish this. But we also can't make sure that we overwork the students. If we overwork students, we aren't going to accomplish what we actually need to, and we're going to miss the mark. So student workload, mental health, and opportunities are my three big things.
Any rebuttals? Okay. Question 7. How will you use your position as SMOB to combat against the recent hate crimes and racism faced against minority students? And we'll start with Boomy.
So like I might have already alluded to throughout this entire time, I'm very, very big on equity, making sure that social justice, anti-racism, things of that sort are at the forefront of our school system. And the way that I've gone about doing that in my own community and what I hope to bring to the board is by having conversations that lead to action. I want us all to be able to have candid conversations, to have the skills and teach our students the skills on how to do that and how to turn admiring the problem into dismantling it. I've done this through my own school's Equity Leadership Council. I've tried doing this through AACPS's Let's Talk Justice. And I've tried doing this with every single adult that I talk to, regardless if we have the same ideologies, maybe even political beliefs, etc. But the main focus is to allow these conversations from everyone that's in the room, even bringing people a seat to the table to have these conversations, and then by hearing people's different opinions, using that to enrich Anne Arundel County.
Fletcher?
So like I already mentioned, I'm good friends with Josie Araya, who is one of the former student member of the boards, and she brought in GCC, Global Community Citizenship, which if you're one of my one of my sophomore and below students, you know that it probably hasn't gone so well over these past 2 years. And what I talked to Josie about is, can we redesign it so that it has better conversations about ethnic majorities and LGBTQ+ and other commonly underrepresented groups, histories? Again, like Boomy pointed out, When we have those discussions, we grow as people, and we need to do that if we're going to have a good environment. And so with that, what I want to do is make sure that we redesign GCC to have better conversations and have better construct, history classes, to have better curriculum. So that way we're having those meaningful conversations and improving students' environments that they're living in on a daily basis.
Natalie?
Yeah, so very similar to what my other candidates have said, although I believe that GCC is merely the first steps. We need, like Boomy said, to get these conversations started, not just on the student level, on the teacher level. We need to be talking with teachers, getting their input while also, informing them. And in my experience, one of the best ways to, increase empathy and, cultural awareness is to attend Let's Talk Justice meetings and hear other people's stories. So giving people the platform to share their stories, to start the conversation, to uplift people who have had negative experiences, so that we as a county can work together to fix it.
Boomy?
So I'm actually glad that Fletcher brought up GCC, because I had the pleasure in my freshman year to help teach students and instructors on how to go about the class. And while I agree that GCC might not be well received by everyone, I wouldn't say it's the consensus that it's bad. And I think that with going with the objective of what we have about GCC, learning how to communicate and learning how to learn from different global perspectives, we need to starting that conversation earlier, not just having it required in freshman year, but we need to start having it earlier in our academic careers, middle school, even elementary school, so we can carry that out.
Yeah, okay. Any other rebuttals? Oh, Fletcher?
Yeah, well, I want to add on to what Boomy said, especially, character growth doesn't need to start when we become 13, 14. Character growth needs to start when we're way younger. And so Boomy raised a good point about in the middle school, when we have our history classes, we shouldn't just be learning about the, all-American history that we have. We need to learn about the Native American history and all the other histories that actually occurred, right? We can't just sort of pick and choose here. That needs to happen. We've got some really weird history that blocks out some important parts.
Natalie?
I completely agree. And, when it comes to going back to the elementary level, that also includes, working with elementary teachers, because, I know a lot of teachers on the secondary level have meetings about implicit bias, about, teaching students of different backgrounds and cultures. But is this really happening on the elementary level? We really need to expand it.
Any other rebuttals? Oh, Boomy?
I would actually like to say, in tune with what Natalie was saying, that starting this at the elementary school level is already happening. And if we can I don't want to say, federalize it, but centralize it, then we can see greater results than what we've already seen. I've had the pleasure of talking at Severn Elementary, and soon I'll be talking at Monarch Academy about teaching elementary schoolers about how to learn about social justice, about how to be anti-racist, about how to treat your neighbor like you would treat yourself. And it's changing their attitudes, and hopefully it's going to change them when they go into high school and middle school. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Okay. What are your plans for advocating for students in the LGBTQ plus community with regards to policies related to gender, gender identity, sexuality, and more? And we'll start with Fletcher.
So again, I think that as we look at all these things, it starts by getting that ball rolling. We have to have good, productive conversations to get the education piece done. And then we need to actually take action. And so I want to, start to look at what policies can we implement at the county level. This comes by talking with the LGBTQ plus students themselves and figuring out how can we help you. And so by doing that, we implement policies at the board level. We change the professional development so that they, as teachers and staff, are having those discussions. If we don't have those discussions, though, and we don't understand each other and why every student is important, then again, we miss the mark and we leave students behind. And as a school system, we cannot leave students behind. It just is not the right model. It's not the right thing to do.
Natalie?
I think this goes back to equitable representation, making sure that, we are, as representatives, are hearing from LGBTQ students and, uplifting their personal voices. Also, as an LGBTQ student, I would love to increase LGBTQ health lessons, starting at, when health lessons start. I feel that, as a community, we are underrepresented in that area. And I think that we have a lot to work on, and also introducing it to younger grades, starting at the elementary level.
Boomy?
So I think when we're answering this question, right, we need to think about, what does it mean to be an ally? It's more than just having professional developments. It's more than just having conversations. It's about saying, we as a student body, we as a faculty, we as a board of education are dedicated to making the concerns of the LGBTQ community our concerns. And so while we can have lessons in community wellness about, pronouns and gender dysmorphia for one day, what we need to do is immerse it into our curriculum. We need to say, hey, you need to be learning about this at a day-by-day, semester-by-semester, quarter-by-quarter basis. You need to be having the lessons about Marsha P. Washington and Harvey Milk in your history lessons. You need to be learning about the contributions of LGBTQ artists in your art classes. You need to be learning about all these different things immersively as you go through the school year, not just on maybe Lesbian Visibility Day, which is actually today, by the way, or just learning on special times like in June, which is Pride Month. We need to be having this happen every single day.
Any rebuttals? Fletcher?
Yeah, I just think it's again important to point out that we do need to change so that way students feel that change on every single day. It can't just be one day of a year where they feel represented. And so that's, looks like gender neutral bathrooms, and making sure that students are able to feel accustomed with a name that they want to use, the correct pronouns that they're being referred to by. We have to be doing those things on a daily basis. And those need to come through, policies and enforcements and punishments. We have to build a welcoming community, and we can't miss the mark on that.
Natalie?
Kind of backpacking off what my fellow candidates have said, I also believe that we need to take all of these great ideas and implement them at a younger age, getting it really normalized, so that we, as the LGBTQ community, don't feel like outsiders and feel like that we are being heard, represented, and feel safe.
Great. We're about halfway through the questions now, so we're doing great. You guys are doing great, keeping on time. Next question. Many past SMOB candidates have included mental health and equity in their platforms. What new ideas do you plan to implement on these topics? And we're starting with Natalie.
Yeah, so based on new ideas, when it comes to mental health, I want to get it at a younger age. We need to stop the problem at the root of the cause, which comes in with elementary school psychiatrists, social workers, and mental health guidance counselors. When it comes to equity, equity does not mean equality. It means, giving what someone needs based on what they have. So, that goes hand in hand with representation, making sure that there is equitable representation, because at the moment we need to work for equitable representation so that we can reach equal representation all around the county for every school, for every student.
Boomy?
Something that I would like to see and what I would like to bring to the table, should I be elected as SMOB, is the importance of acknowledging neurodivergence. And that's a word that not a lot of people know. But when I speak about that, I'm talking about students who have conditions such as ADHD, who are on the autism spectrum, who have OCD, etc. And while we bring awareness to these illnesses, and I don't even want to call it that because they're not illnesses, they're not something that needs to necessarily be corrected. It's just a different way of thinking that's not necessarily neurotypical. We need to be building a culture of acceptance, accepting that students may not be able to think the same way as the other kids in their classrooms, and building different types of learning styles and giving those accommodations to families so that their students can be as successful as everyone else in the classroom, as well as providing different types of mental health resources for those who may be battling depression or different types of illnesses that may make them not feel as well as they should be when they're going into the school and having to participate throughout the school day.
Fletcher?
So mental health is something that hits home in my campaign and in my own personal life. As a Severna Park High School student and a junior, I've been in my school for 3 years and experienced 2 suicides in our community. And And what I can tell you is that mental health is not something we can continue to push under the rug, because it just doesn't work. It's not a viable tactic. It's not going to work. And so to address that, we have to make sure that we are addressing every student's unique mental health needs. That comes through the student's workload that they have in a day. Every student has a different amount of stuff on their plate. And if we aren't designing schedules and allowing students to have something flexible enough for them to feel as though they are able to get through their days, then we're failing the needs of that student. That also means that we have to make sure we tighten the counselor to student relationship. The counselor's job is to help students, and that's at the youngest level, the middle school level, and the high school level. And yet for some reason, I've watched repeatedly as I've gone throughout all three of those levels in this county, the counselors haven't connected with the students. They're there to help us. And yet what help have we really been given other than designing our school schedules for next year? I don't know.
And time. Thanks. Any rebuttals? Boomy.
I'd like to echo what Fletcher's saying because I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that the key to basically succeeding in what we're all talking about is changing the culture. You know, when we talk about mental illness, what do we think about? We think about those who may be portrayed as crazy on TV, but these are our classmates. These are our teachers. These are our family members. And building a culture in which people can be honest about what they're going through is the first step to making sure that students and all the other members of the school body can get the help they need.
Any other rebuttals? Fletcher?
So it's just like Boomy said, if we don't have those good conversations and really get the ball moving here, then we're not going to actually move anywhere with it. And so as we think about, I've broken my leg twice, and every time that that's happened, I've gone to the doctor. When I need help in my school, I go to that teacher. And yet with mental health, whenever we have problems, we choose to shut ourselves out and not actually go and seek help. We need to change that dynamic, and we need to do better as students and as a county. We need to provide better for our students.
Natalie?
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think kind of adding on to it, we need to focus on listening rather than jumping in and trying to fix the problem. I see that a lot as jumping in, trying to get kids back in class as quick as possible without sitting down, hearing what the real issue is, and allowing these conversations to come out to see how can we really address this so that you can get back to where you need to be healthy and happy. So listening, I want to stress listening.
Any other rebuttals? Okay. Through the past few years, the topic of SROs, school resource officers, in schools has come up very often. As SMOB, what is your position on SROs in our schools? And we're starting with Boomy.
Now, personally, I'm going to touch about, my own experience. I'm not from Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I'm actually from Baltimore County. And I've grown up with having SROs in my schools. And to be very frank about my position, I feel as though SROs should not be in an educational setting. I feel as though we should be having more restorative justice with children, and that's what I'm going to refer to our student body as, with children, minors, about their behavioral issues or something that would cause any need for an officer to be in a school building. And I feel that this is a complex topic in which I would like to talk to more students about, because although I feel as though we should lean more towards restorative justice and get less officers into our school environments, different families, different students might feel differently. And so I would like to have those discussions and talk more candidly about it. But in terms of my own personal beliefs, I feel like we should have more one-on-one counselor-based restorative justice when it comes to our students, rather than, immediately going to a school resource officer.
Fletcher?
So in this one, I've got two sides. I've got the side that I've lived through and the side that I've listened to. And so the side that I've lived through and that a lot of other Severna Park students would agree with me on is that we have a fantastic SRO. His name is Officer Schwartz, and I'm confident that should a student walk into my school with an AR-15 across their shoulder, Mr. Schwartz would get right in front of all of us and take that bullet and put him away. And that is something that I think is so crucial, is maintaining that fundamental idea that SROs are there to protect us. Now, admittingly, in the past year, we've seen the conception of what police officers are for get a little disfigured. And because of that, it is my objective to watch the reactions in Harford County, where I'm watching they're going to pull out their SROs. I want to see how that goes. I think that what we have to remember is we're about to go back to schools, and that brings back into consideration school shootings and other events that are very, very important for us to have good protection there. I think if we do pull out SROs, we need a second line of protection there behind that. And that needs to be something that we focus on. So personally, if we can make SROs something that everyone's comfortable with, great. But if we don't have that, we find something new.
Thanks. Natalie.
On a personal level, I agree with Boomy. However, the position ultimately is not about me. It's about what makes the students feel safest. And so that would be where I would collaborate and communicate with other students about their own personal feelings to try to gauge where they are. Because, you know, when it comes to, you know, the problem of school shootings in our country, you know, SROs can be helpful. However, when it comes to issues like the school to prison pipeline, there are studies done that show that SROs do contribute to that. So it would have to be, you know, I would have to set aside my own beliefs and find out what the students really want.
Boomy?
You know, I think it's important that we emphasize student voice, but I also think that on certain topics, as representative, you are not a puppet from the students. You are your own person, you have your own beliefs. And as a student of color, and I know that a lot of different students of color can identify with this, that school resource officers, they often do not make a lot of different students in our system feel more safe. They make us feel less safe, and that's something to consider. And if our biggest issue when it comes to wanting school resource officers is like having a school shooting, that's an issue as well.
Thanks. Any other, Fletcher?
Yeah, the last piece I want to just add in there is school resource officers are, in a lot of ways, and by the definition of their name, there to help and support students. I think that we are able to, you know, look at a different way to vitalize that. So we find a new position that, you know, isn't equipped with a firearm, and have them be the school resource office or be the school resource center. So we make more opportunities for students to go places when they need to report something or get help without having to have that school resource officer who is a county policeman or woman.
Natalie?
So Boomy, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And if reasons like that is why I would ultimately turn to the students, because I will never have the experience of, you know, being a student of color. I will never have the same experience with a school resource officer, which is why I would want to turn to the students, because ultimately I can't give the most unbiased decision without having input from other people who have different experiences than I.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, now time for a quick brain break. This is a fun question. So, what is your favorite streaming platform, and what do you like to watch on this streaming platform or just watch in general in your free time? And so we're starting with Fletcher.
Okay, so I struggle with that one because quite honestly, Netflix is really nice for like when there's something that I just want to go find that's super dumb and I can like go on my phone about. But I have Hulu Live and it has like every one of my favorite shows. And like I'm a big NFL guy, so when the football season rolls around, I'm always on Hulu Live. So personally, I would have to say Hulu Live is probably my favorite streaming service. I love watching football. Go Philadelphia Eagles. I know they're not a good team. I think it shows a little bit of dedication though, even when you don't have the right cards.
Okay, Natalie.
So funnily enough, we actually had a bit of a conversation of this earlier with Lindale Middle School. And personally, I have to agree with what was said in that meme that HBO Max is the best streaming service. However, my favorite shows are on Netflix, and that is Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra.
Okay, Boomy.
Okay, this is completely separate because I also love Legend of Korra and Avatar: The Last Airbender. And Natalie, we can talk about that another time. But I will say that I'm the one who said HBO Max was the best. And when I go on HBO Max, and I know a lot of people who are watching are going to be upset, but I'm actually a pretty big DC fan. I know everyone's into Marvel. I know. I've been watching so much Batman animated adventures, and I'm going through all the different animated series. It's great. But in terms of what I like to binge, I actually go to Amazon Prime because, like I said in the Lindell Middle SGA meeting, I watch an obscene amount of BBC dramas, particularly adaptations of Dickensian tales. So like Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, David Copperfield, all the type of stuff. I eat that up. And sometimes I end up having like a British accent at the end of it, and it's kind of cringy, but it is what it is. If you guys have Amazon Prime, please look into it. It's so good.
Oh, we have a rebuttal. Okay, Fletcher.
I just think this is going to be the most important rebuttal of my night, so I wanted to use it. I'm out of stuff to watch, and I have so much free time on my hands right now with campaigning and this full school workload. So if anybody wants to send me ideas, I would love that. I'm waiting for Outer Banks season 2 to come out. Very excited for it, but I need new stuff to watch for the time being. So please let me know.
Oh, Boomy.
This is no shade to you, Fletcher, but if the best thing that's coming on TV that you're looking forward to is Outer Banks season whatever, then I really do need to get you on some new shows. But I'll text you about that later. Don't worry, I'll get you some good stuff to watch.
I think you guys all just gained and lost a lot of votes right there with those opinions. Okay, the next question, we're moving back onto the business aspect of this debate. So next question is, you have had an opportunity to review the 2022 budget presentation from Dr. Arlotto. What section of the budget would you reallocate for additional funding? And we're starting with Natalie.
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the mental health, I would love to allocate more funds to that. Dr. Arlotto has already started the process of creating more positions for guidance counselors on the elementary school level. But, you know, I truly believe that that is just the beginning, because in that budget presentation, you know, there were 2 positions allocated, and, you know, I just feel like we need more if we're going to give people the equitable experience of, you know, mental health resources.
Boomy?
I wholeheartedly agree with Natalie. I also looked into that section of the budget, and I thought that while it was great that I think about $500,000 were allocated towards additional counselors and school psychologists for schools, particularly elementary schools only have 1 for the entire student body. I think that in addition to allocating more funds to hire more personnel on that front, we also should be distributing more money for autism awareness and education for our faculty, as well as just for other different accommodations that go with neurodivergent, conditions, and giving some training for teachers to see how to scout that out so that they can contact parents to see if their child needs to go down that type of avenue. So, you know, you can get them started earlier on. I have a lot of different friends who are like, and even my brother who did not discover they had a neurodiverse condition until way out of high school or way later into their academic career. So giving funding towards that so that those tiny little notices can be picked up earlier in someone's academic career would be a way that I would allocate funds to.
And Fletcher.
So I think that with this question, a big focus of mine is the opportunities piece. As a Severna Park High School student, we have some really great things like the PLTW program, our AP courses, and things like our College Career Center, where it's a woman by the name of Miss Nancy Jackson, and she does a fantastic job. Every time I have a question about anything related to my future, I can go to her and she answers it. But my friend who also wants to go into law when he's older can go to her about those things. Or my friend who wants to go into marketing when she's older, she can go to her about those things. What's really great is when we are able to give students information and feel like their personal interests are a priority. We can do that through the College Career Center, but it's something that our high school is the only one in the county to have a designated area for that. A lot of times it's combined with a guidance counselor position, and those people already have enough on their plate. So I want to establish that all across the county at the high school level, to be able to give students informational resources on a daily basis. I also want to make sure that we are investing in student programs like, PLTW and other things. You got to cut me off, don't you?
Yes, I do.
No problem.
You knew it was coming. It's okay. Any rebuttals? Oh, Fletcher, you can go first.
Yep. So I want to take the funding and invest ourselves into programs like PVA, PLTW at other schools where it's not already had. I also think that our CAT North and CAT South centers could include some more funding, because those centers, their objectives are to provide opportunities for students with special passion interests. And if we're providing really good funding into those, it's going to give the best education to those students. But we can't only give it to those students. We have to make sure that every high school, every middle school, and every elementary schooler has opportunities to feel like their personal interests can thrive, and their curiosity, no matter what it's in, can thrive.
Boomy?
I think that Fletcher just touched upon a really great point. I mean, college readiness, and not everyone is going to college after high school, but for those who are, college readiness is a very, very complex topic, and it's very hard for a lot of people, especially those who are first generation American, and also those who are first generation college students. And I think adding on top of that, helping students who are lower income, who need those additional resources, and also those whose English is not their first language, is a very, very additional good step that we could be taking to help those students in our system.
Natalie?
I 100% agree that we need to be putting stuff towards college readiness, but I also believe that we need to be putting stuff towards the opposite, giving students the opportunity to continue on a path that isn't exactly college, on another career path, on a, or something else, because, I know a lot of my stress and anxiety stems from, feeling the need to get to a good college. So having students prepared, if they don't want to take that path.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, next question. What is your plan to deal with educational gaps caused by COVID-19 and virtual learning? We're starting with Boomy.
So like I said in my opening remarks, I acknowledge, and I'm sure that a lot of other educators do as well, that we're not all at the same place. And I'll speak for myself when I say that virtual learning has definitely shifted the way that I look at school and my really academic progression. And so that one thing that I would like for us to do, not only as potential board members, all three of us, but as a community within AACPS, is to recognize we're not all going to be at the same place. So this means that the pacing that we had in online school is not going to be at all translated over to in-person school, right? We can all acknowledge that. And so maybe having not as many late penalties when it comes to work, because we are all mentally strained from being quarantined for the last year and a half. Also recognizing that we're going to have to go over a couple of different topics that we either done at the end of the year or just throughout the year that many different students were not doing well at while they were in virtual school. And then also exacerbating those different types of good resources we had while we were in online school. So online tutoring, things like that, so that we can help students get back on where they need to be.
Thank you. Fletcher.
Sorry, do you mind if I hear the question one more time?
Definitely. What is your plan to deal with the educational gaps caused by COVID-19 and virtual learning?
So there's two pieces here. It's for one, making sure that we work on the opportunity gap and the educational gap that has developed substantially this year. Students in low-income families and the ESOL programs, they need a lot of focus after this year. They've been really hurt and affected by this. And if we don't provide the right resources to get them back on track again, we are going to leave students behind. And our big motto here in the county is no student left behind. So we're kind of, not doing the right things if we do that. The other piece to that is we have an obligation this year. It's commonly been referred to as the learning loss. And I found myself calling it that for a while. But the truth is it isn't learning that's lost. It's not gone. It's learning that still has to be done. And we have to make up for that. We have to spend next year learning and doing the right things to bring the education gap slimmer and slimmer, and every single day, because every school day is going to matter this next year. I can promise you that.
Natalie?
I 100% agree with what my fellow candidates have said, but also adding on to that, I think it ties back to going back to equity. Other students are going to need more support coming back in. We need to give equitable distribution of resources, of teachers' times, until we can get to that place of equality to where we can move forward. Additionally, working on getting participation back up, because I know we've seen a lack of participation in school ever since online learning has started. We need to get kids interested in school. We need to get students excited for school so that we can get that participation up, so we can close that gap that Fletcher was talking about.
Fletcher?
The last thing I want to add on is I can't sit here and tell you about how much learning we have to do next year and not talk about how I plan to execute that. We have to make sure that with all the learning we're about to divulge into this next year, we're watching the workload it's going to have on students and the effects it's going to have on students' mental health, which is why I plan to initiate a policy that would establish a team that is doing a full-fledged investigation into homework. That isn't to figure out the learning learning opportunity that we haven't done yet this year. That is to figure out homework for these next couple of years and set the precedent for these next couple of years.
Okay, Boomy?
I think that while we can all admit that COVID has definitely exacerbated the opportunity gap between many different students, that gap did not appear out of thin air. That gap has been there for quite some time. And so we need to look at what was causing that gap before. I've talked to many different students from my ELC.
Fletcher?
And I just wanted to finish establishing that plan for that investigation would include figuring out the factors of what students have going on in their home life, work life, student work life, all those different things. So that way we can make sure we're figuring out, okay, this is what is happening all across our county. And then that way over these next couple of years, we can say to ourselves, all right, what does a good English homework model look like? That's what we need to apply consistently. What does a good math homework look like? That's what we need to apply across the county. No longer should we just say to teachers, you need to assign homework. Now we can provide examples of what actually works. That's what the investigation should do.
Any other rebuttals? Natalie?
I think Boomy made a fantastic point that, this gap has always existed. And that once again ties back to representation. We need to get students of all different backgrounds, of all different areas, of all different schools, all different programs. We need their input because ultimately, like Fletcher was kind of talking about with an investigation, it's almost our job as SMOBs to launch an investigation to find the root cause of this problem so we can treat the disease rather than treating the symptoms.
Boomy?
In terms of this investigation on homework, I'm pretty sure is what it was called. I will like to say, and I don't know, I feel like I'm always a defender of teachers, but I will like to say that many teachers, although they're required to have a certain number of homework assignments within the grade book, they don't all just assign like solid homework assignments. They often say you finish this for homework or you do this and then I'll count that as a homework grade, things like that. And so I think one of the solutions is one, talking to teachers because they're as much of the school system as our students, and also figuring out how we centralize a solution that fits for all different schools across the county and their own cultures.
Any other rebuttals? Okay. What advice would you give to students as they transition back into in-person learning? And we're starting with Fletcher.
So I think that this one is that voice piece. Now, certainly it's going to be a little bit of a leap of faith. We're going to put together a program over the summertime and put that out, and we are going to do what's in the best interest of the students. But are we going to be able to design the perfect school program the first week back in school after months and months of not being in school? No. And we've seen that consistently this past year, that we just don't know what the right answer is in times that we haven't lived through before. So we're going to learn our lessons. We're going to figure out what we need to do. And most importantly, we're going to listen to students and teachers. This is something that we tend to forget, is that we need to listen to the people that are actually going to go through this process. And then we're going to establish a program that works for everybody. We have 3 months of summer. And if we aren't spending that daily listening to students and teachers about what is going to work best for them come the fall, then we are not doing the right things. And so come this fall, I want to make sure we've got a program that's working well for all students. And that's going to be my objective, is making sure that the program works for students, teachers, and everybody that's engaged within it.
Natalie?
I stressed this when the three of us met with Lindale Middle School earlier today. I think we need to stress patience and flexibility. We can't rush into this. Ultimately, my goal would be to keep the students as safe as possible because school is supposed to be a safe place. We can't rush the process. And we have to be flexible with the process because, it's a virus. It's unpredictable. We don't know where it's going to go. We might have to go back. We might be able to move forward quicker. But I would also stress to not be afraid to reach out. I know as someone who went back hybrid recently, it was a drastic change and it took a bit of a toll on my mental health. So, stressing to students that we are there for them if they need to reach out, I think is of the utmost importance.
Boomy?
Can you repeat the question for me?
What advice would you give students as they transition back into in-person learning?
Right. So I think like Natalie already touched upon this, and we talked about this at our earlier meeting, that to students, and I'm talking to the students directly here, expect a culture shock. expect to not resort to a year and a half ago when you were with your friends and you thought it was only going to be a spring break, and not a year and a half of being quarantined. Expect to not feel good. Expect to not feel on your best every day. Expect to be a little bit scared about the state of our country when it comes to this pandemic, and reach out to your teachers, because as much as we want to be back in school, they want to be back there with us. I can guarantee you that. And lastly, I would say that, and I would say this regardless of if you're coming back from COVID or if we were just coming back for a new semester, take every day as a singular day. Don't worry about what happened yesterday. Every day is a new day, because to be very frank with you, that's all you can do when it comes to being in school. And that's the safest way.
Fletcher?
So I realized in hearing the question again that I didn't really fully answer like I had wanted to. And so the other thing I want to give to students is this as a piece of advice. This past year, I'm sure you would agree with me that at some points you felt like, what? Why are we doing this? What are we doing? I didn't even know about this. This just doesn't feel right to me. What you can expect, should I be the student member of the board, is open and clear communication about why we're doing things, what we're doing. And I'm promising you that you will see something unexpected and different, and that you're going to finally see your board of education having more good communication with you all about why we're doing what we're doing and putting successful programs in front of you guys.
Any other rebuttal? Okay. AACPS is exploring incorporating a fully virtual model in the near future. What benefits do you see in this idea? And we're starting with Boomy.
Yay. Okay. So in terms of the benefits of this model, and I know that this might be shocking for those watching, but there are students who have thrived under this virtual setting, those with social anxieties, those who like to have their own self-pacing when it comes to their classwork, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I've even found myself in some subjects doing much better than I would in an in-person setting. And so I think in terms of the benefits, I think that it'll call for us to, as a community, provide different types of opportunities for those who have to stay virtual or who would prefer to. And that means when it comes to our extracurriculars, maybe all the CRASC meetings shouldn't be for those who can only get to Annapolis. Maybe we should have those meetings so that those who cannot come, who don't have the access to, can stay home and still participate. We'll have to reform some of our things so that we can truly emerge into this digital age, because that's one of the benefits of, one, living in the present and subsequently living in the future, but also living in this time where we can do school completely virtual. And I think that's a benefit and a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Let me repeat the question. AACPS is exploring incorporating a fully virtual model in the near future. What benefits do you see in this idea? And so next will be to Fletcher. Let me know if you need me to clarify anything.
So I'm going to presume you're discussing the model that is looked at for students who aren't ready come the fall to go back to school. We have our at-risk students and many other students who will fit into that category that will enroll in that fully virtual program. And I think as Boomy pointed out, we have a lot of students who thrive in that program. So figuring out how we can make it as successful as possible is a priority. And I think that through that, we can do some really great things. There are some opportunities at some schools that are really great in that school, but that we should have in other schools. But that has some complications along the lines of, do we have enough students? Do we have enough teachers to fund that, to promote that? Well, now students are able to do that virtually. So if I'm a Severna Park student, but South River has something really cool I want to be a part of, and I'm in that fully virtual program, well, we can allow all those students to then connect to that program. And we can do that everywhere. And I think that that's what's really key and successful about that, is its ability to connect with other schools, systems, and what they have in place already.
Okay. Natalie?
Yeah, so similar to what my fellow candidates touched on, but also, I think the virtual model has allowed attendance, to thrive, which is kind of contradictory because we've also seen it decrease. But I know personally, being able to attend back-to-back meetings without travel time, being able to do multiple clubs in one day, because once again, no travel time, and if I have to watch a younger sibling, or if other students have to stay home to watch another sibling, there are outside pressures other than school, and online school helps, alleviate that stress of travel, that stress of having to be in a different building. And additionally, there has been a lot of extra support time given to us on virtual learning, like flex time. And I think that can be extremely beneficial to a lot of students, having that time to go reach out to teachers to talk one-on-one. Yeah.
Great. Just to clarify, this would be similar to like evening high school, where your diploma would say you graduated from a virtual school instead of your home school. You would no longer attend your home school. It would be a completely virtual option with completely virtual teachers who don't teach kids who are in person. So any rebuttals? Boomy?
I will say, just with the 30 seconds I have left to rebut, that upon hearing that clarification, although that does kind of separate a student who chooses that option from their regular school community, I will say that it is good that we can give students and their families autonomy over how they want to have their learning and educational experience, especially when they're going through a public school route. And so keeping as many students in AACPS as possible is kind of what any SMOB should be about. And I know that that's what I'm about as well.
Any other rebuttal? Natalie?
I agree with Boomy, and upon hearing the clarification, I think my point on attendance still stands. It's allowing students who need to work, who need to care for someone, or have external pressures that might not allow them in school. It keeps them in the school system. It keeps them getting their education, which is ultimately the biggest goal of the county.
Any other rebuttals? Okay. What are you most unprepared for in your role as the student member of the board, and how will you address this weakness? And we're starting with Fletcher.
I think it's probably along the lines of, this is a position I've never done before. Admittingly, I've done plenty of other positions. I've led my Boy Scout troop of 100 kids that are all ages 11 to 18. And, I've led many projects and been a part of so many things within our county, but there's really no position that could really prepare you for this one. So next year, as I've got all my school workload and possibly this job, I think that balancing that workload is going to be something that's going to be a task for me. But I will say that I've always been able to handle when I've got a lot on my plate. I played sports and was a part of a lot of classes and clubs last year, and while we were in the in-person environment, and didn't have a problem with that. So I have no doubt that I'd be able to thrive in this setting and, be able to balance all the different factors that this position would bring on.
Great. Natalie?
Very similar to Fletcher, never been in this position before. I'm hoping my experience in other leadership positions will come through, but additionally, the time commitment and organization that takes, I'm not really sure what that's going to look like, kind of going in blind at the moment, but, I'm quick to adapt, and I thrive under, a full schedule. So, I'm excited.
Boomy?
I think we can all agree that none of us are prepared for senior year, just off the bat. None of us are prepared, especially faced with this potentially extremely prestigious role. And while I could go and talk about, how am I going to handle my next year's workload? How am I going to handle things at school? One thing that I can say I am definitely not prepared for is how to connect to parents, because I think that if that's one role, I'll call it, that I don't know what it's like to be. I don't know what it's like to have a daughter in our school system, or a son, or just a regular student. I don't know what that's like. And so how I want to address, I wouldn't call it a weakness, but just this new step that I would be taking is to, like everything else, listen. I want to hear from every single factor in our school system, not just the students, but our teachers, our administrators, and our parents, because we are all a part of AACPS. And so hearing from that section is going to be, I think, very, very enriching just to me as someone who cares about our education system. And it's a perspective that I really want to learn to empathize with and learn to aid, because they're the ones who I hold very, very important alongside our students.
Any rebuttals? Fletcher?
I think another piece that I want to, address too in this is, I took the time this past weekend to go drive to all of our 35 middle schools and high schools in our CAT North and CAT South facilities. And what's really eye-opening, well, not eye-opening because my eyes already were open, is just how broad our county is. It's over 150 miles to accomplish this. Now, granted, I got lost it a couple of times, so that probably added in some mileage. But The truth is that I live in my own small community. I have to take the time to diverge outwards, and something that I will be doing is making sure I spend as much time as possible listening to every other perspective as opposed to just mine.
Any other rebuttals? Boomy.
I think with what Fletcher's saying, touching on like my last point, it is very hard to listen to all these different conflicting perspectives. Like I said before, you have to listen to teachers, administrators, parents, students. And so while I am more, I won't call it apprehensive, but while I'm more interested in hearing from parents when it comes to my role as the board, should I be elected, I really, really am excited to see, or a little bit anxious to see, how to balance all the different perspectives of the players in our school system. And I hope that it will become successful for whoever is on the board next year.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, now we're on to our last question of the evening. If you do not win this position, what can we look forward to seeing you do next year? And we're starting with Natalie.
So, I would love to continue expanding my work in diversity in the PVA program, and not just expand it from just the vocal program to the entire PVA program on the high school and middle school level. You'll also see me continuing to advocate for the representation that we need in CRASC, and, coming to those meetings and, getting people involved, reaching out to different people, even if I don't end up getting this position. And additionally, I'll be interning over the summer at the Kirov for the International Music Festival, which I'm hoping will give me more insight onto cultures and music that I can use to propel, the work in diversity more.
Boomy.
Well, I'll say first and foremost, no matter what the results of the election is, Beckett, you're going to be seeing me help with Let's Talk Justice. You're going to be seeing me at CRASC meetings. Those of you who are from my school cluster, you're going to be seeing my face from ELC. And really, to put it very simply, regardless of what happens with this election, whether I win or the two amazing candidates by my side win, what I'm going to be doing in every single capacity that I can find is to serve you, the community members of AACPS. I want to make sure that I emphasize diversity, inclusion, equity, to have representation for marginalized groups, everything, making sure that whether or not I'm the forefront of that on the board, or if I am alongside those who are on the board to helping that pursuit get completed, I want to make sure that our goals and the goals that I've set for my campaign are met, regardless of whether I'm in that seat or not. So that's what I'm going to be doing next year, regardless of the event, the results of this election.
And Fletcher.
So I think the important thing that, I like to talk about is that all of us knew each other, and we're getting to know each other the day before we even handed in our nomination slips. And so with that, none of us at the end of this election are going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they won. I hate them. I'm never going to talk to them again. We will all wind up working with each other and communicating after this election. I can tell you that definitively, because I know that we've been working with each other and have known each other before this election even came into our minds. And so with that, after the election, regardless of who wins, I will make sure that I'm spending time to work with them to give them my perspective and to make sure we're getting other students' perspective, because again, as we've all emphasized tonight, the important piece is listening to students. And so helping them out, helping them do their job is something that I'm going to strive to do. And so whether it be, student workload, mental health, or any of these other things that I find passion in, I will help them by being able to bring that passion to the table, regardless of how this election ends.
Any rebuttal? So now we'll start with closing remarks, starting with, Boomy, do you have rebuttal? Okay, you can go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before we go into closing remarks that the campaign is not over yet, but I have had a wonderful time being alongside you, Fletcher, and you, Natalie. And like Fletcher's already put into, I would be feeling very, very lucky should either of you win. And I think that we have a really, really good set of candidates this year. And I look forward to working with either of you, or really all of you, in any type of capacity to make our school system better alongside our other fellow students.
Natalie?
I'd say continuing on that front, no matter who wins, AACPS is in good hands either way. And, collaboration, continuing to collaborate would be, I'd be so grateful to do that with you guys.
Any other rebuttal? Okay, now we're going to start with closing remarks, starting with Boomy.
Okay, so again, good evening to everyone listening and everyone watching, and thank you for sticking with us for so long. Again, my name is Buma Masore, and I'm a junior from Arundel High School. And like we've already touched into, I am very, very passionate about service and serving you, the community in Anne Arundel County. And, regardless of the effects of this election, I want to make sure that one, every person who's watching becomes more anti-racist, becomes an ally for LGBTQ youth and adults, and learns to become more tolerant. Now, there might be very much a lot of different differences that me and my fellow competitors have when it comes to things that we go about regarding policy or just our opinions on different things. I mean, we already saw we might have different opinions on SROs, etc. But what I want this entire debate to exemplify is the art of communication. We all have different ideas. We all have different plans. We all have different futures that we see for AACPS. And I think that via the ideas that I've heard from my candidates and via the ideas that I hope to hear from many of you who are watching, I think that we can create a better AACPS overall, because that's what we all have stake in, right? We're all here to make sure that our school system is the best for our students, including me, Natalie, and Fletcher alike. So thank you for watching, and follow Boomy for SMOB on Instagram.
Next we have Fletcher.
So first thing I want to say is thank you guys, everybody who's watching. I have the little YouTube tab up in the different section, and I'm seeing 135 of you still watching, and that's excellent. The fact is as someone who has watched a lot of board meetings, after about an hour, I asked myself why I'm even doing it anymore. So the fact that you guys are still here watching, I appreciate it. And sincerely from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for your continued support. It really does mean a lot to us as candidates. But this next piece, I want to talk right to you guys sitting at home. I typed up this whole big elaborate, here's what I want to talk about, integrate that ethos, pathos, and logos as we hear our English teachers talk about. But I don't think that it's actually what I really want to talk to you guys about. And what I really want to talk to you guys about is you've heard what we've talked about today. You're going to hopefully go home and do a little bit more research about who these candidates are. You can follow me at Fletcher_ForceMom, and you can look at my website with FletcherPort.com, and you can find everything that you need to know about me. But the truth is that what you need to do at the end of the day with your ballot and with your vote is make sure that you're voting for someone who you know is going to represent you and make the decisions that are going to do the best things for you. So it's someone who's listening to you, making sure that every single person's voice matters, and then making the best decision on behalf of them. If you find that that's where if your trust is with me on that, and if you find that you think I will be able to successfully represent you and your fellow students, then bubble that 8 on that Scantron. But I promise you that you are going to be able to find success and find good leadership and a good student member of the board if you vote for me and I get the role. Thank you all for your time, and I do hope to be your next student member of the board.
And Natalie.
Thank you everyone for joining us and sticking along so far. I know that this was long, but I really appreciate the support. I just, like Fletcher said, vote for someone who is going to represent you and your vote and your views and your opinions and what you need. Once again, I want to stress, at the end of the day, I am here to represent you, to work alongside you, to listen to you, and to advocate for all students, all staff, and, everyone that is a part of AACPS. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. And, if you want to learn more about me, follow Natalie for SMOB on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much.
Thank you for viewing the 2021 Student Member of the Board debate for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Ballots were mailed to delegates Friday, so look for your ballot coming in the mail as soon as you can. Ballots are arriving today, and some students have already received it. Check your email for further directions if you are a voting delegate. Best of luck to all 3 candidates at the upcoming election.